Hello everyone! Tonight we journey back in time to one of the most enduring and baffling maritime mysteries of the 20th century. A case that has haunted sailors, investigators, and mystery lovers alike for well over a century. It is the story of three lighthouse keepers who vanished without a trace from the remote Flannan Isles in December 1900, leaving behind a scene so eerie and puzzling that it has inspired countless theories, from natural disaster to supernatural intervention. This is not just a tale of disappearance, but of strange clues, unanswered questions, and a silence that echoes louder than words across the windswept cliffs of Scotland. The Flannan Isles, also known as the Seven Hunters, are a small group of rocky islands off the coast of Scotland's Outer Hebrides. They are beautiful but unforgiving, with jagged cliffs, treacherous seas, and storms that lash the rocks with merciless force. For centuries, these islands had been avoided by sailors except in times of necessity. In 1899, just a year before the mystery, a lighthouse was built on Eilean Mòr, the largest of the Flannan Isles, to safeguard ships traveling through the dangerous waters of the North Atlantic. The responsibility of maintaining the lighthouse was entrusted to a rotation of keepers. In December 1900, 3 men were stationed there: Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. All 3 were experienced, hardworking men, dedicated to the harsh and lonely duties of lighthouse life. Their job was to keep the great light shining through the night, ensuring safe passage for ships navigating the stormy seas. They lived isolated lives, accompanied only by each other, the lighthouse equipment, and the ever-present roar of the Atlantic waves. On December 15, 1900, a passing ship noted that the light from the Flannan Isles was not shining. This was highly unusual and deeply concerning. For ships relying on lighthouses as navigational beacons, a darkened light was a warning sign. Something was wrong. However, due to stormy conditions and limited communication methods of the time, no immediate action could be taken. Days passed before a relief vessel, the Hesperus, was dispatched to investigate. What the crew found upon arrival would become the stuff of legend. When the Hesperus anchored off Eilean Mòr on December 26, 1900, the relief keeper, Joseph Moore, was sent ashore to check on his colleagues. Moore later described his approach to the lighthouse as deeply unsettling. The island was eerily quiet, with no sign of movement, no smoke rising from the chimney, and no welcoming figures waiting at the landing, as was customary. When Moore entered the living quarters, he was met with an unsettling scene. The lighthouse was immaculate, as though still lived in, but the keepers themselves were nowhere to be found. Inside, 2 of the oilskins, thick coats used for protection against harsh weather, were missing, but the 3rd remained hanging on the wall. This suggested that 2 men had ventured outside, leaving one behind, but none had returned. Even more unsettling was the table. Half-eaten meals were found, as though the men had been interrupted during dinner. A chair was overturned, as though someone had risen in haste. Clocks inside the lighthouse had stopped, their ticking silenced forever. It was as if time itself had frozen the moment the keepers disappeared. Moore called out for the men, searched the rooms, and checked the storage areas, but no trace of Ducat, Marshall, or MacArthur was found. The logbook was examined, and the entries only deepened the mystery. On December 12, Marshall wrote that there were severe storms, worse than he had seen in 20 years, with powerful winds battering the island. He also mentioned that Ducat had been very quiet, while MacArthur, known for his tough, fiery personality, had been crying. This detail was chilling. MacArthur was known as a hardened seaman, the kind of man unlikely to be easily shaken, yet something had terrified him enough to weep openly. The final log entry, dated December 15, simply read, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." And yet, meteorological records from that period revealed no storms in the region during the dates mentioned. The weather had been rough, yes, but not unusually so, and certainly not enough to justify the extreme distress noted in the logs. This contradiction left investigators baffled. Were the log entries exaggerated? Could they have been written under the influence of something else? Fear, madness, or even supernatural suggestion? The search expanded to the island itself. Moore and others, examined the cliffs and shoreline for evidence of what might have happened. At the western landing, they found signs of recent damage. Ropes had been torn from their positions, and the iron railings had been bent. Evidence suggested that the island had been battered by strong waves, possibly pulling one or more of the keepers into the sea. But this explanation did not account for all the details. Why had 2 oilskins been taken, but 1 left behind? Why had meals been abandoned midway? And most puzzling of all, why had all 3 men vanished together? The official investigation, led by the Northern Lighthouse Board, concluded that the men had likely been swept away while attempting to secure equipment during a violent storm. But this explanation left many unconvinced. If the men had gone outside to secure the landing, why would they leave food uneaten? Why would all 3 men go together, leaving the light unattended? Protocol dictated that at least 1 keeper must remain in the lighthouse at all times. For all 3 to abandon their post was almost unthinkable. Over the years, alternative theories began to surface. Some suggested that one of the men had suffered a mental breakdown, perhaps driven by the isolation and harsh conditions, leading to a fight or murder. Suicide scenario. Others speculated about more unusual causes: alien abduction, sea monsters, or ghostly forces said to haunt the Flannan Isles, which already carried a reputation for strange happenings long before the lighthouse was built. Locals spoke of eerie lights, phantom voices, and curses that clung to the island. Even today, the Flannan Isles disappearance remains unsolved. The lack of bodies, the strange logbook entries, the untouched meals, and the silence of the island combine to form one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history. The lonely light on Eilean Mòr, still operational today, stands as a monument to the men who vanished, their fate still shrouded in uncertainty. As we conclude part 1 of this chilling story, we are left with more questions than answers. Were Ducat, Marshall, and MacArthur victims of a natural disaster, pulled to their deaths by a monstrous wave? Or was there something more sinister, something that defies the boundaries of logic and reason? In part 2, we will dive deeper into the investigations, explore the most compelling theories, and examine why this mystery has endured for over a century. The investigation into the Flannan Isles disappearance revealed layers of detail that only deepened the mystery. When the Northern Lighthouse Board released its report, it pointed to a massive wave, a rogue surge from the Atlantic, as the most likely explanation. According to the theory, the keepers had gone down to the western landing to secure ropes and supplies as the sea grew violent. But this conclusion, though tidy, never satisfied those who examined the case more closely. Too many details were left unaccounted for. Too many contradictions hung in the air like storm clouds over the cliffs of Eilean Mòr. For one, why did all 3 men leave the lighthouse at the same time? Standard protocol was clear. 1 keeper must always remain behind. The work on the landing required only 1 or 2 men at most. So why did no one stay inside to keep the lamp running? The unexplained abandonment of duty suggested either a breakdown of discipline or an emergency so dire that it drove them to break rules instinctively. Yet, the evidence of uneaten food on the table and stopped clocks suggested they had left suddenly, in haste, as though startled or forced. Witnesses from the relief crew reported a chilling detail. At the western landing, they discovered equipment boxes broken open, iron railings twisted, and turf torn from the ground as if by sheer force. The devastation hinted at immense power, the kind that only the sea could unleash. But meteorological records from the mainland indicated calm weather around the time of the disappearance. If there had been no recorded storm, how could the destruction have occurred? Some argued that isolated microclimates could have produced violent local waves without being detected elsewhere. Others whispered that something more mysterious had struck the island. The logbook entries added another layer of strangeness. The mention of MacArthur weeping was particularly unsettling. He was known as a tough, quick-tempered man, not prone to fear. For him to be reduced to tears suggested a terror beyond ordinary storms. The entry about God is over all carried the weight of finality, as though written in resignation, almost like a farewell. But who had written it, and under what circumstances? The handwriting matched Marshall's, but the tone seemed collective, as if speaking for them all. Alternative theories soon emerged. One suggested that a sudden rockslide or collapse of the cliffs may have swept the men into the sea. Another theory pointed to a violent rogue wave, sometimes called a freak wave, which could rise without warning, towering over the cliffs, and crash down with devastating force. Such waves were not well understood at the time, but modern oceanography has since confirmed their existence. Yet, even if a wave had struck, it did not explain why all three men would be caught in the same place, abandoning their responsibilities inside. The psychological explanation has its supporters too. Isolation has a powerful effect on the human mind. Weeks alone in a desolate, storm-battered island, surrounded by the endless roar of the sea, can erode even the strongest spirits. Some theorists suggest that paranoia, arguments, or even madness could have led to violence. Perhaps one man attacked the others in a fit of rage or breakdown. Perhaps a struggle near the cliffs caused all three to fall to their deaths. But again, no blood, no signs of violence, and no bodies were ever recovered. The sea may have hidden the evidence, but the lack of remains keeps the theory unproven. More fantastic explanations have also persisted through the years. The Flannan Isles had long been associated with superstition. Locals spoke of strange lights seen on the rocks, ghostly figures walking the cliffs, and voices carried on the wind. Some claimed the men had been taken by supernatural forces, spirits of the sea, or the fairies and selkies of Scottish folklore. Others pointed to extraterrestrial abduction, fueled by reports of mysterious lights in the sky during that same winter. Such ideas may seem far-fetched, but they thrive because the ordinary explanations never feel fully satisfying. The story of the vanished keepers took root in folklore and culture. Poets, writers, and songwriters transformed the mystery into legend. The famous poem Flannan Isles by Wilfred Wilson Gibson, written in 1912, immortalized the case with haunting verses describing the empty lighthouse and the vanished men. In literature and film, the story has been retold again and again, often with supernatural twists. For some, the mystery is not just about the men, but about the power of the sea itself, a force vast, ancient, and indifferent to human life. Years later, subsequent lighthouse keepers stationed on Eilean Mòr reported strange experiences of their own. Some claimed to hear footsteps when alone. Others spoke of voices calling their names on stormy nights. Whether these were products of imagination, fear, or something else, they added fuel to the enduring belief that the island was haunted by the spirits of Jucat, Marshall, and MacArthur. Even with modern technology and research, the mystery remains unsolved. The rugged landscape and violent seas around the Flannan Isles mean that any accident could easily erase all trace of its victims. Yet the combination of strange clues, the logbook, the uneaten meal, the stopped clocks, the missing men, make the case far more than just an accident report. It feels like a story carefully crafted to disturb, with every detail deepening the sense of dread. Today, more than a century later, the lighthouse on Eilean Mòr is automated. No human keepers remain to tend the light, no souls to face the storms. The building still stands, silent and watchful, its beams sweeping across the Atlantic as it did on the night the men vanished. But the silence of its walls carries with it the echo of an unanswered question. What really happened to the three lighthouse keepers? Perhaps the simplest explanation is true, that the men were lost to the sea, claimed by a rogue wave while performing their duties. Perhaps, but the human mind resists simplicity when so many strange details whisper otherwise. The Flannan Isles case endures because it does not just tell of death at sea, it tells of mystery, of the unknown, and of how even in a world of reason and science, there are still places where shadows prevail. And so, the story of the vanished lighthouse keepers remains unsolved, drifting like the waves around Eilean Mòr, timeless and eternal. Was it storm, madness, or something beyond our understanding? We may never know. But what is certain is this: the light of the Flannan Isles still shines, and with it, the memory of three men lost forever to the sea, and to history.